Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. It's been a while since I've been out here in my backyard, and I actually started doing videos in my backyard during the pandemic. The sun is actually shining in my eyes, but it's been a while since I did videos in my backyard, and I started doing these videos out here in the middle of the pandemic. And then I think when the pandemic ended, I moved into my indoor studio. I have a really fancy schmancy studio setup, and I can mix up the videos to provide you guys content, and I'm going to do that. But I figured it'd be a nice change of scene for me to go back out here in my backyard. And welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda. Thank you so much for being a viewer and subscriber. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about why the news media is bad for our emotional health. As you know, there's a lot of negative news out there. Every YouTube channel you see talks about the coming stock market crash or the coming housing crash or the coming recession, and how your savings are going to be worth nothing because bad news actually sells. That's just the way things are. Bad news does sell. You're not going to get a YouTube channel get a lot of views if the YouTube channel talks about positivity and staying calm, because that's just boring. Unfortunately, we live in a climate, we live in a news environment where we're so numb, we're so desensitized to negative information that the only thing that gets our attention is more negative information. In fact, I'm going to show you this article on your screen from the New York Times, and let me pull it up on my phone. Why strangers are good for us, and this is a pretty fascinating article that I came across in the New York Times. And essentially, the author of the article says that, and I'm going to quote from the article because this author lives in New York City. Not so long ago, it was impossible to go through life without speaking in some way to a variety of strangers in your life. The bus driver, barista, security guard, receptionist, butcher, government clerk, store cashier, and restaurant server were all humans who required at least the bare minimum of conversation. If you were at a playground a generation ago, half-heartedly watching some swing set drama, ignoring the casual greetings of another parent would be extremely rude. And the author goes on to say, and this is really important, when I lived in New York City a decade ago, I couldn't spend 10 minutes outside without speaking to someone. That's the thing I love about the place, how New Yorkers will kibitz and comment and carry on a conversation in line for pizza, on the sidewalk or in the subway, ask for directions, or compliment a particularly awesome hat of someone that they had never met without any awkwardness. Now, in case you're thinking, well, I don't live in New York City, what does this have to do with me? It has everything to do with it has everything, folks, to do with the entire Western culture. It has everything to do with the world, in fact. Now, as many of you may or may not know, I was actually born in India, and I moved to the United States of America in 2002. So I can tell you that this phenomenon of progressive isolation, progressive, discontent with the general news media is making its way not just through American culture, but through all cultures. Now, this is important. This is what the author continues to say about New York City. Today, you can spend a week in New York shopping, traveling, eating, and working, and never utter a word to another human being or even take your headphones off. So, what is the point I'm trying to get at? The general news media and in fact our general environment has become so negative. The general news media and the general environment has become so negative that we have become desensitized to it. In other words, we simply are trying to we simply ignore the general news media because the general news media we recognize instinctively is bad for our emotional well-being. And in case you've been a regular follower of my channel, this channel, the Ignition Time channel, is about the country, the economy, as well as our money. But the only way you can be in sync, if you will, with the world, the only way that you can get through this crazy world that we live in, is if you are balanced emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually, and intellectually. And I think that now more than ever, now that we are in a post-COVID world, Now that inflation is becoming a problem for everyone. Rising interest rates are causing all sorts of problems in terms of borrowing. Gas prices are at an all-time high. Food costs more, and even though you may be making more money, you simply can't afford gas. I read viewers and I read comments from you viewers and subscribers who are saying that they're actually sleeping at work because they can't afford to pay for gas. So the general news media is contributing to this. I want you to know that this entire situation we find ourselves now, I believe, is worse than COVID. Yes, I said that. You see, COVID was a sudden, dangerous physical manifestation of something we couldn't control. But now, I think what is emerging all over the country is not just loneliness and isolation in a post-COVID world, because COVID made it dangerous to talk to strangers. And by the way, this article that I referenced earlier from the New York Times, I'll show you this article on your screen again. This article talks about the importance of random interactions with strangers, which is good for our mental and emotional health. In other words, this is part of that social component of balance. Emotionally, we need to have friends. Even random interactions with strangers, if you don't have a lot of friends, that is good for our emotional health. And now we don't have random interactions with strangers. If anything, we're busy on our phones, we're busy creating these self-fulfilling prophecies for us. And I've been guilty of that myself. I've talked about this previously on our channel. I was so busy and focused on work in 2021 that I essentially didn't spend much time with my mother, who was living with me, and then my mother passed away. And then I've had to, I've been trying to deal with that. So I think that the general news media has actually made things worse by focusing on negativity, by focusing on politics, by focusing on Trump and Biden, by focusing on how bad things are. I also think that at the end of the day, each one of us should be responsible for our own emotional well-being. Do things that elevate you. Do things that essentially put you in a situation where you engineer positive conversations with people around you. It can be people you know, it can be friends. You've got to stop talking with individuals who are energy vampires. You've got to be able to initiate random interactions with strangers. Who knows what you could learn? And I want to focus this video on the emotional well-being component of it, because the emotional well-being is a huge part of how you'll be able to get through the rest of this year and how you'll be able to set the stage for the remainder of your life. I think that a lot of us are focusing on money right now, rightfully so. But at some point, the money problems tend to end. They tend to cycle through. You may have less money today. You may have more money next year. You may lose the money. You may gain the money. But the one thing that's never going to change is your perception of yourself, your self-confidence, your self-belief, your inner drive. And all of those things require constant nurturing. Like all these trees behind me, they require constant nurturing. They require sunlight. They require water. They require nutrients from the soil. So you've got to be able to feed those things to your brain. I want you to do everything you possibly can to try and take care of yourself mentally, to try and take care of yourself emotionally, so that you can be in the right frame of mind going forward. And I think a huge part of that is just to ignore general news media, and please subscribe to channels like mine so that I can help you get to the next level in your life. Thank you. I hope this video was helpful. Please comment below. Let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.